Good evening. My name is Eugene Peterson, and I'm the chair of the Anne Arundel County Human Relations Commission. Human Relations Commission has specific statutory responsibility to investigate alleged claims of housing discrimination and resolve any and all, if possible, if the allegations prove to be true, or seek resolution of these alleged activities through mediation. We've used the county mediation center as a help with that. We also have a broader responsibility to address discrimination in all its forms in Anne Arundel County, because we believe, as the county executive and the county council believe, that Anne Arundel County should be the best place for all. And that means it can't be if we countenance discrimination in all its different forms. We now see we have our secretary's here. Oh, hello, Madam Secretary. I'd like to, before we go into the agenda, point out some things, and our HRO can support me if I get anything wrong. Currently, we have 4 vacancies on the commission. They are Commissioner Salid, who's resigned in County Council District 5, Commissioner Call, who has resigned in County Commission 7, Commissioner Edwards, who has resigned in County Council Commission 6, and a county executive appointee, our former vice chair, Commissioner Clapsaddle. I'm pleased to report that it looks like 4 out of these 5 positions are being vetted. As you may be aware, but I'll state it for the public, in order for someone to become a commissioner, they first have to be nominated or selected by a county council member if they come from a county council district, or selected by the county executive, who has, I believe, 3 or 4 appointments on the commission. And then a resolution has to be passed by the county council, signifying that they have become commissioners. Hopefully, on the 4 out of the 5, action will be taken soon, and we will begin the process of building our capacity. So I thought that I would go ahead and bring that up. Are there any questions? Did I get it right, Madam HRO?
In principle, yes.
Thank you.
All the important parts.
Okay. I'd like now to move to our roll call, and I'll ask with the information that I gave, Madam Secretary, Commissioner Hatcher, and I got a communication from Commissioner Farinas. She's out of town on business. I gave her an excused absence, which the secretary will record. So now we'll take the roll, and my math tells me that we have enough commissioners that we can take action to approve the minutes and other things we might want to do tonight.
We have met quorum.
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Anne Arundel County Human Relations Commission. When I call your name, please say present or aye for attendance. We have Lisa Sorrow that is sitting in for Commissioner Karpowitz.
Present.
We have Commissioner Daydoni.
Present.
We have Commissioner Agbola Tolson.
Present.
We have Commissioner Gaskin.
Present.
We have Commissioner Goodman.
Present.
We have Commissioner Hatcher, myself is present, and Chairman Peterson is also.
Present.
Okay. I will say with that, we do have enough members for a quorum. Do I supposed to do roll call for HRO Smith? Not really. I don't think we've done that before,
No, we haven't done that before.
but I'm gonna acknowledge her and Chanel's presence as well.
Yes,
Thank you
thank
for
I am
joining us
present.
today.
Thank you.
Roll call is now complete. Thank you
All
for
right.
your acknowledgement.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I'd not like to move to the next item on the agenda, which is approval of minutes from the April 20 meeting. I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes with any technical revisions that might be needed. And I'd like to have a motion stated somewhat like that to approve the minutes.
This is Commissioner Dodoni. I move we accept the minutes that have been distributed for the April meeting, subject to any technical editorial corrections.
Thank you, Commissioner Daydoni. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll
Tosin.
second. Oh, go ahead, Tosin.
Tosin, you seconded?
Yes, sir. Second.
Okay. It's been seconded by Commissioner Agbula. Okay. There are no objections, are there? Hearing none, the minutes have been accepted with any technical corrections necessary by unanimous consent here. We were scheduled to have, as the commission knows, we have been concerned as a lot of citizens in Arundel County have become concerned with the recent and ongoing hate bias incidents occurring in the county in different areas of the county. With that in mind, we had a healthy discussion last meeting in the April meeting, and it was suggested that we contact some of the victims of these incidents and see if they would be willing to come forward and share the incidents, their impact on them personally, their impact on any extended family and friends that they have, and their impact on the larger community that they live in. And on the agenda, we have Lisa White scheduled for a presentation, but I don't believe Ms. White has clocked in yet. Is that correct, Chanel? Or Asha? I can't.
I can't see who's in the room. Chanel wouldn't know. Oh, there she is. Chanel's here.
We have Chuck Hurley in the room as an attendee. I don't see the other person you were referencing.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, with that in mind, we'll continue this discussion with Commissioner Daydoni, who contacted one of the individuals involved with an incident. And I'll turn it over to Commissioner Daydoni to give a summary. Will be signs by the individual's consent, names and identifiers, because part of this incident involves a young student in the school system.
Thank you very much, Chairman Peterson. Did all of the commissioners see a copy of the police complaint or have the opportunity to see a copy of the police complaint?
Asha, I don't think we shared that with all the commissioners, did we?
No, I didn't share the actual police complaint with anyone. I just sort of summarized the narrative.
Right.
Okay.
But
And I did have the opportunity to speak to the mother of the student who was involved, and I will briefly summarize the incident. There seems to be no disagreement going from the police complaint to what I was told by the mother about what happened at the school, that the student was attacked by a fellow student, physically attacked and pummeled. That the video evidence was insufficient to get specific detail, but nonetheless, there was disciplinary action enforced against the student who is accused of the attack. The parent, the mother, did not know of the incident when it occurred, so did not go to the school to pick up their child after the child was attacked. Did not know about it until the child came home and said, I was attacked in the schoolyard today. The mother did interact with the school, and because of the nature of the complaint, the SRO was involved. I think we all know that the SROs are representatives of the police department. So we had two entities involved, Anne Arundel County Public Schools and Anne Arundel County Police Department.
And SRO stands for Safety Resource Officer, for anybody that doesn't know.
To summarize the mother's concern, she had a feeling that the school just wanted to make it all go away. Not being contacted initially, as she initiated the contacts with the school, her interactions with the vice principal were sufficient. The vice principal invited her and her child in, and they reviewed the video, which was at a distance, and the sound wasn't clear. No sound was available together. But again, it had to be at the mother's instigation. The SRO interaction was much less validating and affirmative for the mother. The first contact by the SRO was to see if she wanted to press claims, and she said throughout the SRO's tonality was aggressive, hostile, and it was almost as if the SRO were blaming her for causing upset where there didn't need to be any. Those are my words, not her words. Those are my words. Her summary of the whole thing was she just felt that both the school system and the SRO wanted it to go away. She used the phrase, sweep it under the rug. That summarizes what I heard from that mother.
Okay.
I will add that because of my position in the NAACP, and I am on this commission because the NAACP, with the support of the Caucus of African American Leaders, nominated me. This is a familiar story. And it's not universal. One SRO doing that can be enough to create a story. The mother in this case said that the SRO's supervisor then contacted her, and it was an entirely different story. That there was responsiveness, concern, but the interaction with the SRO and the lack of initial response from the school, initial action from the school painted a picture of indifference. And into this story follows, and now I'm going to do my commentary. Again, I've been exposed to many of these cases. It seems to me entirely appropriate that the school has a high standard for evidence, necessarily, and a high level of privacy, because there are generally students involved. So they do not reveal information such as the specifics of the punishment, even though it might be known, and the punishment might seem insufficient. The student handbook includes a student code of conduct and lists a hierarchy for the severity of offenses and appropriate punishments to go with them. A punishment of 5 days suspension may seem insufficient if your child has been knocked down and pummeled on the school ground. And you don't even get that information. If you get that information, it's because you pieced together the bits and pieces of it. This was a kind of event, and this is the appropriate maximum consequence for that event. Or it's noted around the school ground because the kids knew what was happening and the child came home and told the mother about it. So that's my summary. A sense that the school system and especially the SRO just wanted to sweep it under the rug, that was all a big bother to them. And my editorial comment that this is not a unique sense or consequence for the parents who become involved. Eugene, is there any more you'd like me to say?
No, I think that's an excellent presentation, given the fact that we have certain restrictions because of privacy requested and privacy needed, in the sense of we're talking about a student and their extremely strict privacy requirements for disclosing anything about a student, unless the student and the parent agree. And even then, I think there's some questions about that. I guess I'd like to open it up now for any observations commissioners might have, and maybe a way forward. I mean, you know, this is the Anne Arundel County Public Schools. It's an ongoing, they have ongoing incidents that happen, all kinds of bullying and these kinds of hate bias incidents or alleged hate bias incidents that occur. And we had talked in general about having the need to have the principals that, not the principals at the school, but the principals that deal with these issues in the school system, because it's not just one individual, it's a number of individuals that deal with these, come in and dialogue with us about their system, some of the concerns we might have about what we've been finding in some of these alleged incidents or confirmed incidents, and what actions or activities school district is taking to make sure that its policies and procedures are followed. And also, is there any thinking about any additional changes that might need to occur? So having said that, I'll open it up for other commissioners and their observations. Oh, yes, Commissioner Dado.
Yeah, I would like to comment on this, if I may, not report, but comment.
Okay.
I think as commissioners, we should be aware of the documentation that's available to the entire public, including us, on the Anne Arundel County Public Schools websites. First, I would like to make us aware of the policies, and when they exist, the corresponding regulations. If you go to the AACPS website and click on the tab that is for the Board of Education, there is a tab in the menu on the left-hand side of the page then for policies and regulations. Most, but not all, policies have regulations. First, I want to call out policy JCCA, bullying and cyberbullying, harassment and intimidation. That policy and regulation calls for reporting. And those are recorded, and I'll speak about that a little bit more in a moment when I get to the monthly reports from the board to the Board of Education. And then I want to call out a series of 3 additional policies. JO, letter O, bias behavior and language, also mandatory reporting. JP, student sexual harassment and misconduct. And we are aware of the last one, JQ, because we worked on that and advocated for it. Safe and inclusive environment for LGBTQ plus students. So you can find the policies, you can find the requirements therein for mandatory reporting. I'm sorry, you can find the policies and the requirements therein. If you go back to the home page for the Board of Education and click under board reports, there are monthly reports. I'm switching my screen. And at this point, the monthly reports that are published, put up on the website, are a transportation report. There's a bullying report. There's a discipline report. There's a diversity and inclusion report. And there's a security report. The security is less about student security, like in safe and secure, and more about, can anybody break into the school systems and what are we doing? So I would call our attention to the bullying report, the discipline report, because it is related to equity, and the diversity and inclusion report. The diversity and inclusion report looks primarily at activities out of the Office of Equity and Accelerated Student Achievement to have diversity, equity, and inclusion education and efforts. That website, that particular page, has some shortcomings. For months, we have been trying to get the archive of reports in there. It's still not happening. Apparently, it looks just fine inside the school system, but from the outside, it's not there yet. We're still working on that. I mean, I complain to, I bring this to the attention of Deputy Superintendent Monique Jackson, and she brings it to the attention of the IT department. In fact, right now the bullying report is listed. The link says it's March 2023, but it's actually from somewhere in 2022. So that's what I wanted to add about reports available to us, and I think we should keep our eyes on them. Other organizations are looking at reports too. The Caucus of African American Leaders hears reports. The NAACP hears reports. And Eugene, I think I've already directed you to the president of the NAACP. Yes. Showing Up for Racial Justice, which is entirely citizen. A group keeps records of bias and bullying behaviors, as does the entirely citizen group Connecting the Dots. So the school has a catalog of the events that show up through reports. And then other groups have a catalog of events that show up just because people are keeping track. What I have observed, and this is my trying to make sense of the situation, is that in several places, and I would say with the police department, as well as with the schools, when you can't get information out about what were the consequences, how did the perpetrator respond to the consequences? How did the perpetrator's parents respond to the consequences? It often feels like being swept under the rug, being kept hidden, indifference, inadequate consequences, and a lack of justice. And so I've been drawing the following parallel. When the trial was held for the perpetrator of the Capitol Gazette massacre, our state's attorney who led that case herself, stood with the victims and said, "Today we have seen justice." But if you can't stand with the victim, if you can't see the consequences, it seems to be felt as there is no justice. I don't know what to do with that. I'm sharing it with you. We are caught between protecting privacy and maintaining high evidentiary standards. and not being able to let the victims know what the consequences were, if there were any. I yield the floor.
Okay. Very, very informative presentation. Any other comments from other commissioners after Commissioner Dadoni's presentation?
I have some. So are we able to know the school location and also if the Department of Juvenile Services was involved at all? Because it seems like it was an assault, or was it just the school and that was it?
HRO Smith?
Yeah, I was just, hi, everyone. I don't think that juvenile services was involved. I don't feel comfortable to speak to the process in great detail. I think that's better coming from someone who is currently in the school system and has an expertise in this area. And I intentionally didn't disclose the school. So I've talked with the police department a little bit about how we're sharing this information. And I think we can say the level of school that it was. I think we can say that. I think we can say maybe regionally where it was, in the northern part of the county or the southern part of the county, but I don't think we can specify the actual school building for this purpose.
Okay, what region was it? And what level of school?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Asha, but I seem to recall that before a certain individual retired at the police department, we used to get pretty extensive information, location, individuals, the disposition, whether or not take schools it was handled, referred to the school or for disposition, or whether it became a police matter. And I think the police department's trying to find a pin and fill it so that they can provide that kind of information, which of course we as a commissioners could review, but we could never disclose, and we'd never disclose it in a meeting, but we would have more information than we currently get. Am I right about that?
So I can say that you're right, that there is a person in the police department who is revitalizing the reporting to help all of the various entities that have been seeking reports. And there was a staffing change in that area. So yes, that person is getting up to speed. I can also say that the report that I get has everything in it. The question is, obviously how much we can share, especially if the information can be, if people can be individually identified, whether this is the appropriate form for doing that. So I would agree that in the meeting setting, we wouldn't want to do that. And in terms of, I don't know if you have some of the reports that you got previously in terms of the narratives that you may have received outside of the meeting. If you can share one with me, I'd be happy to talk to the police department about whether we can return to that. I know that right now, what we're getting is a summary for the purposes of this group. We're getting a summary, we get the location, and by location, I do mean the region where it occurred, the region in the county where it occurred. And I'm trying to remember right now, Faye, Commissioner Gaskin, where this incident occurred. I can tell you that it was a middle school, that I remember. I want to say
Northern part of the county.
it was, yeah, okay.
Yes, it is northern part of the county.
Mm-hmm. And actually, I think it would be okay to say that it's in your councilmanic district.
Commissioner Gaskin's councilman district.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, that's helpful. My hope is that we can continue to work with the police department and figure out a way to get this stuff. One of the things that I know has happened in the past when the police send us information. They say this is covered by confidentiality, cannot be shared outside of from you, et cetera. And it's big red letters. So maybe we can get more information if the information that they send us has that proviso on it, and everybody on the commission that gets it knows that this is something you cannot share with others.
Okay.
So
I'm sorry. I just think it would be nice, at least if we knew what was going on, because, we could say, okay, in this part of the county, it seems that things are not reported, right? In other parts of the county, and I know for a fact that things have gotten out, in this particular school, there have been, fights and these things have happened and the police were called. And so then it would appear to the victim's family that there is unequal treatment and that things are trying to be covered up. Because whether the school board is leaking the information or anybody's leaking information, I know that I can recall one incident in particular that happened in the Annapolis area, and it was a big fight, and everything was put out there, right? And so even if we as a commission know that things are happening in different parts of the county, if we had additional information as to how discipline may have been applied, and we can draw our own conclusions about what may or may not be happening, and then we can ask additional questions about, how individuals or students in one part of the county are being treated as opposed to another part of the county. And I think that's very important information for us to have. Even, I understand, student privacy, for privacy for people under a certain age, and that type of stuff is not disclosable. But if we as a commission and we are, we have know what our ethics rules are, and we share it not in the meeting, but just, to get those reports, and we have a better idea what's happening across the county and how things are being handled across the county and what things are being referred to DJJ across the county, or DJS now across the county and not other places. I just think it'll be very valuable information for us to do our work.
It might also be helpful for the person in the police department who's responsible for the SROs to talk a little bit about the process that SROs use, because there are some things that happen in schools where people decline to press charges, and there's a certain amount of discretion given for some of these things. I think someone with expertise needs to speak to all of the parameters, but I don't think that it's always an outside decision as to whether or how the police are involved, and whether or to what extent students are charged. So there's sort of like the discipline, and then there's the police part of it. It might be helpful for them to sort of talk about how they make those decisions.
I agree, and I can recall in my history of interaction with the Anne Arundel County public school system that there was a school which shall remain nameless, and there was a principal who shall remain nameless, who took a real concerted interest in potential problem, quote unquote, students, and would have regular meetings with them, and would get involved in any disciplinary or other kind of activities that involve those students. And I say that to say that when and if we have a presentation from the school district, the role of a principal has a lot of influence on how a lot of these issues are treated. And there's a lot of latitude at the local level, at the building level, because with the number of buildings and principals we have, you don't want to manage it from the top down. It has to be take the rules, the policies and regulations, and apply them from the bottom up. And then if we observe a problem, this has been my view of it, we'll address it, but it has to be a kind of localized, following, again, policies and regulations activity. Any other comments, suggestions? I think that
Yes,
pardon?
yes.
Oh,
Another
oh,
comment.
sorry.
Surprise. Um, I HRO Smith's comments about there's the discipline part and then there's the police department part speaks to a place where I'm not clear what the pass off is, if there's a passing from one organization, from the school system to the police department, or if both operate to the full extent of the applicable regulations. So I'd love to know, get clarity on that, which means that when we have the police department present, I'd also like to hear from the appropriate person or persons in the school system. I know where to find the policy and regulations for the school system, the applicable ones. They were the ones I named earlier. I do not know where to find, along with the student handbook, which has the hierarchical list of offenses and corresponding disciplinary actions. I do not know what the applicable regulations and laws or guidances are in the police department. I know we used to have a diversion program under Tanisha, was it Tanisha Perkins? I believe she's gone. And so I don't know what happens now. There was an effort to keep kids out of quote unquote the system, even if they had committed offenses. But there's been a lot of change in the police department. So I'd like to hear from both of those groups. And to add to this, that the whole issue of SROs is a highly charged topic. And it is not. I have not been able to discern a unified position among the Black civil rights advocates and parents to whom I speak, with whom I speak. Stepping into this area, there's tremendous interest from the head of the president of the Anne Arundel County NAACP, but also Dr. Bedell has stepped into this and was part of a national organization devoted to SROs and what SROs do. So at a higher level, I believe we could get from him a perspective that I know I can't get alone.
Thank you, Commissioner Daydoni. It would seem to me that it might be useful at some point in time to invite the new superintendent and introduce him to the commission, and then ask and have a number of like this issue and any other issues in terms of human relations. We had that presentation on critical race theory, so I'm sure he has some ideas about that. As Commissioner Daydoni said, he's been a national leader in terms of working with safety resource officers, so he has some ideas about that. And he probably has some additional ideas about bullying and some of the other things that are going on in the public school system. So that might be something that we might, at some point in time, might entertain doing. We had also talked about getting the actors from the school system involved in a discussion. And I think when we discuss topics for the June meeting, I don't know whether that would be the meeting, but trying to get our arms around how the system works with the different, again, actors that are involved. And of course, a generalized concern that we might all have is if you have a silo here and a silo here and a silo here, how do they keep from not just being silos, and what's the cross talk and cross information sharing that occurs? And that would, I think, be something that we might be interested in doing. Any other comments or questions?
Chairman Peterson, do you believe it would benefit both us and the public in general if we held a town hall on SROs as we did on critical race theory?
Just specifically on safety resource officers?
Yes.
It's something to be considered. Any other commissioners have any thoughts on that? Okay, I'll take that under advisement and probably send out an email and ask how many commissioners, given what's been presented, would be interested in that, or should we broaden it in terms of this? It's the SROs, it's the system that responds to these kind of questions, et cetera. Because I agree with Commissioner Daydoni. Our community, our county is kind of really split on this issue. And I'm split on it because I am not one in the African American community that says we don't need safety resource officers in the schools. I think we do. I think many of them have a positive impact, but I think there needs to be some dialogue with the police department to ensure that we're not simply taking an officer who's had a great career, is near maybe retirement, and sending them off to be an SRO. That's not a good combination of factors to connect together, and making sure that the individuals understand, the SROs, I would think, should understand the close communication they have to have with the school system. And they also have, as Commissioner Daydoni correctly pointed out, with the superior to the SRO in the incident involved, empathy and compassion for the victim to begin with. That's, I think, part of the responsibility that's spelled out for all police officers under their general charge to serve and protect. You can't do that without empathy and interest in the victims involved. So why don't we go ahead and leave it at that, and unless there's any other comments commissioners have.
I just wanted to add one thing, if it's helpful. I think we did talk about a presentation on the bullying and hate bias reporting in the school system,
Yes,
the process for reporting it, the data where it can be found. We extended an invitation to Alice Swift from the Office of Safe and Orderly Schools and Dr. Gillens. Dr. Gillens has since replied and said that she is available for next month. We're waiting to hear back from Alice Swift about whether she's available. So it sounds like if Alice is available, maybe the June meeting would just focus on the reporting from the school system and the question about how the SROs are used and what their role is something that we might want to hear from the police department in a separate meeting. Is that right?
I don't want to pit them against each other, but would it be helpful to have the individuals, the SROs, work with in the school system and the either the head of the SRO department, I would assume, has interaction with safe and orderly schools and equity and accelerated achievement. We wouldn't pit them against each other, but it would be interesting to hear them all. I think
At the same time, you think, like in one meeting, or?
Yes, that's what I'm thinking.
Okay, all right. So I'll find out about that too.
Yeah, and any other commissioners agree with that, or do you want to separate them? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Oh, you know you're going to hear from me. HRO Smith, I really appreciate the education you've brought to us. And on my time on the commission, which is since its first formation as the new commission, I've been exposed to so much great education. Sometimes it's hard for me to put the pieces together. Now, what's this agency? What's that agency? In this case, we're talking about agencies and issues I know fairly well. So I can hold them in my mind, but I don't know if others can. I'm pretty sure the public in general can't. What caused me to speak of doing it together is that when I hear the conversation coming from the community in general, it's about SROs and discipline, which spans the two. And to understand that picture, I think the parts need to be heard together, not in separate presentations among.
Okay, point well taken. And I also think that we can revisit after we put together the presentation for next month with hopefully a representative from the police department and a representative from Anne Arundel County Public Schools talking.
Chairman Peters,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I couldn't find the little hand, put my hand up.
Okay.
Quick question in regards to the SRO. I know that the last meeting or so, we've really been talking about hate bias and hate bias reporting in the public schools. So my question would be, how involved are they with maybe resolving or helping to mediate hate bias incidents within public schools? Because when I think of the SRO, I think of, helping to keep the schools safe, which could be a number of things. But in this general topic of hate and bias, how involved are they? Do anyone know?
Well, I can say this, and I just dropped a link in the chat. The SROs are police officers, right? And that's really why they're in a school. They're in schools
Right.
to deal with potential criminal activity in schools. They serve other functions. They do other things, but their primary role, as I understand it, is law enforcement.
Right.
So to the extent that they're dealing with hate bias, I can remember, a while back that they were sort of all hate bias incidents were supposed to be reported to them because they're being tracked in the process that we're all familiar with, right?
Okay.
The police will document an incident, even if it's not a crime. We know that they document it for the purpose of tracking it. And so hate bias incidents were supposed to be reported to SROs. Now, I don't know if they've narrowed which of those incidents go to them now. And that would be a really good question to ask.
Okay.
But a little bit more about the school resource officers can be found at that link. I think that might be something that they can help with explaining.
Okay. Thank you. I'd like to move on to our next presentation, but I don't think that Ms. White is available. So she has not logged in yet, right, Chanel?
That's correct. She's not here.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so why don't we move on and
Before we move on, can I ask the question if we are still interested in having the excuse me, Office of Safe and Orderly Schools as a potential presenter during our next discussion with the public schools?
I think HRO Smith was gonna Why don't you address that, HRO Smith?
Sure. So Dr. Gillens is Equity and Accelerated Student Achievement. Alice Swift is the Director of Safe and Orderly Schools. And so I invited both of them to come for next month's meeting. Dr. Gillens has said that she's available. I'm just waiting to hear from Alice Swift whether she's available. And now I will reach out to the PD and see if someone can come to represent the school resource officers in that program.
Thank you. I was tracking Miss Swift's name, but I didn't know she was the director of
Yes,
Safe and Orderly Schools. Okay, thank you for that.
she may have a different title. I think
Okay.
that's changed a little bit, but
Big
I think
change.
she still runs all of that.
Yes. Thank you.
Sure.
Since we don't have Ms. White with us, I will contact Ms. White and see if she is still interested in coming at some point in time and telling a very interesting story about her incident that occurred. But moving along, we'll now have a report from our Human Relations Officer, Asha Smith.
Thank you so much. I would like to start off by wishing everyone a happy Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month.
Right.
We have a few updates from the county executive's office. First, it's budget season. There's a very robust website for the budget this year. If you want to know the proposals by topic, so if you want to know what we're proposing to spend in education, what we're proposing to spend in public safety, housing, whatever it is, you can go ahead and go to the budget website and actually click on these little icons that will sort of take you through a summary, a very easy to follow and easy to understand summary of the county executive's budget priorities for this year. So that has been a large focus of the county executive office's work for the last several weeks and will continue to dominate a lot of the agenda for a while. In addition to that, we are accepting applications for the Regional Plan Stakeholder Advisory Committee. This committee is going to be making recommendations about proposed zoning changes. Right now, the committee is for regions 1, 3, and 9. Just so you know, Region 1 is the northern part of the county. Region 3 is Glen Burnie, Severn, and part of Millersville. Region 9 is in the southern part of the county, so like Deal, Tracy's, Churchton, Shadyside. And so they are accepting applications for folks to be involved in making those recommendations about zoning. And that's a really, really important thing. Zoning touches people's lives in a number of ways. For the purpose of this commission, it's important to know that zoning is really fundamental when you talk about housing and housing equity. And so, to the extent that you want to participate or you want to encourage people, to participate, please do so. Have them apply to be on these committees. Obviously, we're looking for diverse representation of folks, making sure that all segments of the county population are represented. Okay. For events, we have the Pride Parade coming up in June. June's a big month. So the Pride Parade is on June 3rd, Juneteenth. The Juneteenth Parade is on June 17th. And those are special emphasis celebrations that are coming up. In addition to that, on June 14th, Risk Management is hosting an event called CPR in the Yard. If you have not heard about this is their first time doing this. They have statistics that have shown that African Americans and women are less likely to receive CPR when they have a cardiac emergency in public. Part of that, they've deduced, some studies have shown, is because people have some discomfort with women in terms of anatomical differences. And I don't know what the hypothesis is for African Americans, but I can say that it's really important to make sure that a cross section of the population is trained and that people are exposed to mannequins that have different looks. So risk management has gone out and found, they've sourced mannequins that are reflective of the racial diversity in our society, and also that look like women, that look like women's bodies, so that people know what to do. And so they are having this event on June 14th, CPR in the Yard. It's from 11 to 1, and they are really focusing on getting a good representation from underrepresented groups. They want people to come out. If you're a part of other organizations, tell them about it. It's from 11 to 1 in the Heritage Complex parking lot. They want a representative from a group, a cross section of folks just to come out and get educated about the issue, to try feeling what a chest compression feels like on a mannequin. It's not full out CPR training. It's more of an awareness event. So please spread that far and wide. In addition to that, the African Diaspora Affairs Organization is partnering with the county's Multicultural Affairs Office for a second part of the Why Mental Health Matters series that they're doing. It is at the Russet Library in Maryland City. And so that's coming up. There's information about that in the county executive's newsletter. You can Google it. It's available. Apparently the first part was very robust discussion. So we're encouraging people to go to that. I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about the MCCR Hate Bias Forum. I did send out an email about that. Sadly, it was way up in Frostville. Frostburg. Frostburg. We were trying to get a contingent of folks maybe who might be interested to let me know so that we might be able to get some transportation to take us up there. Didn't have, a critical mass. It was during the day, which is perfectly understandable. They are going to be doing them around the state. It turns out that there'll be, I think MCCR with the Attorney General's office, they've identified some places where they want to focus a little bit of attention. Even if they are not planning one for our region, the Howard County Office of Equity and Human Rights is trying to sponsor one. They may be hosting one in Howard County. My understanding is that it was exceptional. Our Secretary Hatcher went. I don't know if you want to tell folks what it was like.
Exceptional. I just quickly, some of the key points that came from this discussion that I took away was empowering the victims, was engaging in dialogue. So we had police representation throughout the Western Maryland area, Frostburg, Hagerstown, Frederick, Cumberland, and it truly was the intent. We even had FBI representation, and it truly was a authentic, genuine discussion between the community and our police. The thing that I really took away is that there's still a lack of trust, but there's still some effort on the police department side to kind of change the perspective of how they're viewed and how community, their relationship with the community. So I'm so interested in attending another. One of the things that I kind of wish was a slightly different was, everything had to be on an agenda. And so we had to keep pushing discussion along. And there was some really key things that came out that I really wish we could have dived into. So one of the questions that came up from a community activist was, you know, we're talking about hate and bias in general and within our community, but what about the hate and bias that's still found within our police department? What are we doing about that? How are we correcting that? How are we changing the culture? And what I took from that is that when we have these presentations, because the question was answered and it wasn't answered, and someone called it out like really didn't answer, when we start having our presentations with the public schools and just with the community in general, let's not be afraid to have true conversations that may go against the agenda, that may go against, you only have a 20-minute slot, so we can dive into this. It was a great event, and there's still passion out there, and there's still hate and bias, but there's still love, and hopefully love can triumph all overall, as our rally will be titled coming forward. But it was good. It was a good event, and I hope next time you all can find the time to attend.
Yeah, I'm really hopeful. I've told the folks at Howard County that we're definitely interested in we have folks who would want to go if they're going to host it, and Howard is so much closer, and that would be so much nicer. I did misspeak. It was the U.S. Attorney that sponsored part of this. It was a partnership. Yes. Yes, Eric Barron is the U.S. Attorney for the District of Maryland, and he was part of it. And it's a part of a larger initiative that they're doing around hate bias. And it's, I think, connected to some legislation. So they actually have grant money to do these events, and we're very hopeful about that. So I will keep you posted. Just so you know, lastly, the Office of Emergency Management is partnering with Anne Arundel Community College to host a summer camp for girls around emergency management. It's going to be called Hurricane, which is hilarious to me. I just love it. It'll be from July 10th to the 14th, from 8 to 4:30. And it's going to be in 2 locations. They'll have it at OEM in Glen Burnie and at the Community College in Arnold. So I think that sounds really exciting. It's free, and it's going to raise awareness of emergency management for girls. So there'll be certifications given and all kinds of exciting things. Just in terms of the police reports, in the month of April, there were 17 incidents. One of them was ethnic, 14 were racial, 2 were sexual orientation. I just also wanted to draw your attention to 2 things that have happened recently. These were not in April, these were actually in the month of May. But there was a church in Odenton, one that we are familiar with, where 6 pride flags and 16 pride lawn stakes were stolen. That is I think that's still an active investigation. And there was a sad incident in Brooklyn recently where someone was hit with a cup of gasoline, and a lit object was thrown at them. It didn't actually hit them. If it had, that might have been disastrous. And there was a slur used during the incident. And so, just to be mindful that things are still happening. That's also, I think, and I think they actually made an arrest in that case. So the malfeasor is being taken care of. And that's what I have for now.
Okay. Thank you. Very, as usual, comprehensive and informative report.
Very much so.
At this point in time, I'd like to move on. We don't have, actually,
liaison.
I'd like to ask, is there a report, Commissioner Hatcher?
I do. It may not be as comprehensive, but I will try. So during the Annapolis Human Relations meeting, they had a presentation by Mr. Eric Lashinsky, the Chief of Comprehensive Planning in the Annapolis Department of Planning and Zoning. Mr. Lasinski shared the 2040 comprehensive plan with the commission that really spoke in regards to zoning. It also spoke to Annapolis' big push with trying to have more equity in the fair housing market, whether it's renting, purchasing, in that magnitude. So Annapolis is really trying to diversify the community. So the last couple of months have been really based around that. So if anyone is interested in that presentation, I'll reach out to Mr. Keller to see if we can get a copy of the slides. That's all I have for you.
I would say, Commissioner, go ahead and reach out for the slides, and we'll share, and we'll have send them out to the commissioners.
Okay, sure can do.
Great. We don't have any old business identified, but we do have one item of old business that I need to turn to our HRO about. Commissioner Apter has several times asked us about the idea of doing a hybrid meeting, which would be commissioners that could attend in person, and then we would have the ability to use Arundel TV or the webinar to extend our reach, so to speak, in the community. So I wondered if you had any feedback on that for us.
Sure. I did actually inquire with Kaylee Schultz, who is our former and now current boards and commissions liaison. And she advised that she didn't believe that there was a designated in-person meeting place for this commission during her time. And she advised that we could use any number of county locations. The one that I would recommend is the Independence Room in the Heritage Complex. There are some other boards and commissions that meet there. It has an external entrance, meaning that you can actually access it directly from the parking lot. It is in the Heritage Complex, like I said, at 26, I don't want to lie, but it's on Riva Road. It might be 2664 Riva Road.
I think it might be, because we have met there in the past. And I think if you go to our webpage, that's listed on the webpage as a place where we can and should meet.
It's a great location. It's a great place if we wanted to be hybrid. They have the tech available there. So that would be, it's just easy to get into. And also from the perspective of folks with mobility issues, it's really quite accessible.
Yes, it is.
So it's a good
flat thing from the parking lot in.
That's right. That's right. So it's a good central location. And it's not far from the town center. There's some good eateries nearby if people want to grab drinks or dinner before or after. So yes.
Given that information, I guess we have to decide. Nothing in our bylaws says we have to meet 12 times in the year. So July and August are coming up. I guess the question would be for the commission, and I'll send out an email to this effect, is do you want to meet July and August? Do you want to meet one of those months? And should one of those be our first attempt at the hybrid meeting? So you will get a communication from me, and I will ask you all to respond, and we'll see what the majority of the commission decides.
On that note, if I can add, if there's going to be any interest in revisiting the Unity Day activity, I would recommend a summer meeting.
Yeah, that's correct. Okay. So, well, July and August, yeah, maybe we have two meetings then, because we have to if we're really serious about Unity Day, we have to be united in our approach to it, which is correct. Okay, so that will be part of the email that comes out. New business. June meeting topics. I think our general consensus is that we want to have the school district, the police department, and yeah, that is it. Yeah, the school district and the police department come. Somebody representing the police department from the SRO standpoint, someone from safe and orderly schools, and we hope that that individual will be available. Or if that individual isn't available, do they have a reasonable person under their supervision that could provide the same information? And Dr. Gillens from Equity and Accelerated Achievement, I think that's what it's called. But in any event, that would be either, that would take some time in the meeting. The other thing that we might consider is, again, trying to get a hold of Ms. White. And also, there is some interest in a church which has a unique story in the, I believe it's the Glen Burnie area, in talking about the hate bias incident and continued incidents that they are experiencing in a church property that they're trying to access and sell, and what all that means in terms of the community. Because in the story they would tell the property that's being vandalized is right across from the school. That's not a good thing. And also was thinking of perhaps inviting Bishop Palmer from the church in Odenton that he's the pastor of, that had the incident that occurred. There was a community response, and there was quite a bit of, there was a church service where leadership from the community came out, and it would be interesting to find out from them, as this led to some discussion, good discussion about these incidents and how to prevent them in the community, better, closer ties in the community, maybe closer ties specifically with different religious institutions in the community, and closer ties with other folks in the community that want to stand up and say, this is not who we are. So that could also be part of the meeting. That would probably, I think, take all of our meeting if we did those two things. So again, I will send out an email. I'll talk out. The representative from the church in Glen Burnie said that she's the property manager. She could be available in June, and I haven't spoken with Apostle Palmer, but I will, and see if he's available. And then, given all that, would send out an email to all the commissioners saying these are the items that we have, and want your concurrence to go ahead and have both of these or one of them, etc. Does that seem reasonable to everybody to do? Okay. And we've talked about the hate bias presentation. Well, actually, HRO Smith, you can refresh our memory. The police department, I think, is interested in coming back to make a more extensive and enlightening presentation on the hate bias symbols and what happens in the county. Is that correct?
Sure. Yes, we have revisited the topic of active hate groups. and hate group symbols, hate symbols, hate symbols. And so we are exploring a more extensive presentation than the one that we received last year on this topic to bring everyone up to speed. It would really be not just for this group, but also hopefully for members of the public who are watching so that they can get themselves a little bit better informed. There was a time when I think certain groups were associated like with just swastikas or this or and things have changed. There are lots of new things that we probably want to be aware of. So they're putting something together in an attempt to give us something robust.
Yeah, I agree because just if people have been following the news, and you look at the January 6th insurrection, we had involvement with groups that I had not been that aware of in the past, Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, and they're still alive. They haven't gone away, even though people are being prosecuted, they're still out there. And so it'd be interesting to find out if there are any chapters or individuals that are subscribed to those beliefs of these two organizations and other organizations that are in Anne Arundel County, and what the police department does about that, because they do have symbols, and some of them are very distressing. So that would be another item, and I think that given what we're looking at, that item might transition into maybe September, but we'll see. And I think there's general interest on the commission in having them come back and give us a more extensive discussion of this, because we had one before, but we felt the HRO and I both felt that there was more interest in the commission in digging a little deeper in Anne Arundel County and really figuring out what's going on.
Chairman Peterson,
Yes.
during the hate bias reporting forum at Frostburg, there was a FBI representative by the name of Dumrow. And I had asked the question as to those who have been found guilty of hate bias incidents and or crimes, are they attached to some form of registry where the community can kind of see, what happened or what the offense was? I was told that with incidents, with both, there's no registry, but the FBI does keep a tally of crimes, actual crimes, a catalog of that. So I think it would be really interesting if we can we're speaking with the police department, kind of segue a little bit to our FBI and how they handle more or less hate bias crimes. The local police department deals with the incidents and crimes, but FBI focuses more on crimes. Oh, excuse me. So I think it will be a good possibility to invite someone from the FBI to help us understand how they manage hate and bias crimes.
Okay. Since the police department works with the FBI because they have to report to them the incidents that they find in Anne Arundel County, we could probably ask the police department to see if the individual or individuals, some representative from the FBI that they work with would be willing to come in and make the presentation side by side with the local police, our Anne Arundel County Police Department. It's a good point. Thank you. Okay, and then the only other item, which I know Ms. Sarah will agree with is doing something to focus our attention on discrimination in housing and where we have clout. That was Commissioner Apter's point, and I was hoping that Commissioner Apter could speak to some of the work that he's been doing. He's reached out to folks, and I think I'd ask Commissioner Representative for Commissioner Karpowitz, Ms. Sorrow to speak to this. There was legislation proposed in the last legislative session that could have had an impact on the ability of Anne Arundel County and other jurisdictions to actually do the kind of fact checking that was done in the New York example in the our first venture out into
Testing.
social justice.
Mm-hmm.
The film that we saw on that in Annapolis at the center there. So Ms. Zaro, could you speak to this, please?
Sure. There was proposed legislation this past session that unfortunately did not go anywhere. We were hopeful at the beginning of session, but it did not, it didn't move. What it would have done is made an exception to Maryland's what's called the two-party consent rule for recording. And so in Maryland, both parties, you have to have two parties that consent to a recording. And so that means, you know, if you're on the phone with someone, you can't record that conversation unless the person on the other side understands that they're being recorded. And this causes a lot of difficulty for what's called paired testing. And that's where one person with a certain set of characteristics goes in. In the housing context, they go in, they try to apply for housing, for a rental, for a loan, for the purchase of a home. One person with a certain set of characteristics goes in and attempts to rent or buy. Another person with everything similar background, similar education, similar financial situation, but having a characteristic that's protected by law, race, gender, those are the characteristics that are protected under the Fair Housing Act. That's the only difference between the two of them. And then you compare the way that they were each treated. And again, I think we talked about this at the last meeting. It's really important to have good evidence. And good evidence in this day and age is recording. And without that recording, it's very hard to prove. It becomes a he said, she said sort of a thing. So what Senator Sidner proposed was a minor exception to the law that would have allowed one party consent testing. It would have allowed this testing to occur with recordings, so long as the people doing the recording are part of a fair housing testing plan. There was a lot of discussion, surprising discussion, I thought, about how this was a violation of the 14th Amendment search and seizure. Against search and seizure, there was discussion about, oh, well, they should just go to court and get a warrant. This is, you know, it would be very rarely charged as a criminal offense. You don't need a warrant for civil wrongdoing. But so I think going into next session, it would be very wise to try and coordinate with someone who can sponsor the legislation, maybe pre-file, and do some really good education of the legislators so that they don't come into hearing about the legislation and thinking that it's much more intrusive than it is, or intended to be more intrusive than it is. So I think that some pre-education will be helpful. And I also think that getting some more counties on board, maybe we can, when we're on with Howard County for the training or the hate bias forum, maybe we can bring them on board. They've got a good human relations active board there to move this along. I think one of the reasons it didn't move is because there was other legislation trying to make an exception to, it's the wiretapping statute, but there was other legislation pending also to create an exception in the domestic violence arena. And I think there was more concern about actually about the 14th Amendment search and seizure issues in that one. And so they sort of crossed over. But we should be prepared for that before the session begins this next year.
I agree with that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there was a single Anne Arundel County delegate or senator that was a co-sponsor on that legislation, was there?
No.
Okay.
Not because they're not friendly to it, though. I do think we would have had support from our local delegation if they had, if we had reached out to them.
Okay.
I do think we could get support for it coming from our delegation. Okay,
good. Because that's what I was going to suggest, that we can do some spade work in our county. And having that in mind, HRO Smith, do you think this is something the county executive would be interested in working with his county council brethren and sistren to enact?
If you mean, would the county executive support it? I know that he did. He was very, I can tell you the administration was intrigued by it and felt that it would be a positive piece of legislation had it passed. I don't know that it's something that we could do on a county level just because of preemption. Like, I don't think that we could pass.
Right. No, you're right. Preemption would be in effect. I guess my question is, could there be more outreach with the county council? So if we had county council folks, see, it's kind of like you have to, it takes a village. So if we get the county council folks talking to their counterparts, delegates and senators who they know well about this and say, this is important, we want to do this. If the county executive does that, and then if we reach out, because we all have delegates and senators in Anne Arundel County that represent our specific areas. And a lot of us are good friends with those individuals. So if we took it on ourselves to provide some education and outreach, that would be something we should consider. And I would say that Commissioner Apter reached out to a group, I forget the name of the group, that was would be supportive of this kind of legislation and had said, yeah, we'll sign on to this. And he'd also contacted Senator Sidner on this. So I will try to encapsulate our discussion in an email that I'll send to all the commissioners, but I'll specifically talk to Commissioner Apter and tell him where we are and what we think next steps will be. And I'm thinking that, again, we need to probably be engaged in this process by September, or we're not going to have much impact on the legislative session that's going to come up. So we should start thinking about, as a commission, the individual delegates and senators that we know, and how we could get the delegation, Anne Arundel County delegation, House and Senate, united around working on this and asking if they would please reach out to some of their friends in other counties. And I think also, as Ms. Sorrow suggested, we need to reach out to Howard County, Montgomery County, Baltimore County, and Baltimore City, who I believe all have some form of a human relations effort, and explain to them, and this will probably be developed in an email kind of letter, explain to them what was proposed in the last session, what we think needs to be done, and would they please do what we're doing in terms of trying to get their delegations, House of Delegates and senators, involved in carving out this exception that doesn't have anything to do with the 14th Amendment, et cetera, and which in other jurisdictions, like we saw in New York, has had a very positive and beneficial effect on de facto housing discrimination. Because once you show that it's around and you bring it to the attention of regulators and realtors and individual real estate agents, I think it has an impact on how housing is discussed when housing is available. So I would say that that would be something that we'll work on. Any other comments on on this topic? Okay, hearing none. Are there any good and welfare items? And the reason I put this on the agenda is, as commissioners, you may have specific activities in your area that you want to bring to the attention of the other commissioners. Does anybody have anything like that they'd like to share now? Okay, hearing none, I don't hear any announcements. Our next monthly meeting will be on Thursday, June 15th, 2023, and starts, of course, at 6 p.m. And any member of the community that would like to attend this meeting should go to the Human Relations Commission section on the county website for meeting information and for more information pursuant to the Maryland Open Meetings Act requirement. Having said that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion.
So,
Okay.
Commissioner Hatcher motion.
Commissioner Hatcher's
Right.
made a motion to adjourn. Is there a second to that motion?
I seconded it. Commissioner Gaskin.
Commissioner Gaskin has seconded it. This is a non-debatable motion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right.
Aye.
Okay. All opposed? There are nobody opposed. Okay. I'd like to adjourn the May Anne Arundel County Human Relations Commission. I want to thank all the commissioners for being very actively involved in discussion tonight and in suggestions for how to improve human relations in Anne Arundel County. And I extend an invitation to anyone who is listening to us to join us in June, and look forward to having a larger community discussion on some of the topics that we've discussed today. With that, I would like to adjourn the meeting. So,
Good night, everyone.
good night,
Thank
everyone.
you, and good
Good night,
night.
everyone.
Good night.
Night.
Thank you, Chanel.
Yes.
You're welcome.